This podcast is produced by the ABA Commission on Law and Aging. Listen to hear interviews and stories on topics related to law and aging, including best practice tips for professionals and career advice. Age is not just a number, it's an opportunity for growth and fulfillment. These episodes will explore the hurdles people face while aging, as well as opportunities for improving advocacy and strengthening the legal rights of others.
I'm Erica Costello, and you're listening to the ABA Commission on Law and Aging's podcast, The Advocates of Aging. With us today is Deidre Locke. She is the Director and Managing Attorney at the Weinberg Center for Elder Justice, where she leads a multidisciplinary team in the development of the National Elder Abuse Shelter Model, with services that include direct legal, clinical, and medical support for older adults who have experienced harm. She is also an adjunct professor at Brooklyn Law School for over 10 years, where she directs the law school's Help Clinic, which stands for Helping Elders Through Litigation and Policy. She is also a certified trauma professional, a certified dementia practitioner, and an elder and adult family mediator. Thank you so much for joining us today, Deirdre.
Can you start off by just telling us a little bit more about yourself and your career? How did you wind up where you are now?
Yes, absolutely. So I started, actually, I'm going to go back a little bit because I think it's relevant to some of the issues that cross over with the work I'm doing now. But after undergrad, I worked for a couple different politicians. I worked for a couple local politicians, and then I worked for a US senator. And I raise it only because I'm now doing a lot more policy, or there's more legislative crossover with what I do now than ever before. At some point, I decided that I wanted to go to law school because I didn't feel like I could move the needle as much as I would want to otherwise. And went, did not like it at all, was not at all interested, didn't know what elder law was, had no idea. Frankly, I assumed it was writing wills and doing trusts and estates, and I didn't find it particularly sexy. So I went into criminal law. I became a prosecutor and really enjoyed it. In particular, I loved the work in the Queen's DA's office that I was able to do as a prosecutor of domestic violence crimes. And I started there to learn a lot about the impact of social issues and policy issues and really our societal issues around intimate relationships, family dynamics, family structure, and what it is like for that structure to be disrupted. From Queens, I went to Hawaii and became a prosecutor there for a couple of years. I don't think I need to explain necessarily why. I'm not Hawaiian, but I had a great time and learned a lot out there as well. And eventually then moved back to New York. And I wanted something different. I didn't really want to do criminal trials anymore. In Hawaii, I actually, it was a lot of work in Hawaii. So I wanted to do something different. And I stumbled upon this job, and I didn't know what it was when I took it. It was a big risk, but it's been a great ride.
So Deirdre, what exactly interested you in this area of law? Because a lot of practitioners probably would say that they fell into this area. So, what exactly, was your interest in aging in particular?
I think I have to say I fell into it also, in that when I took this job now 15 years ago, I didn't know what elder abuse really was. I didn't know what the relevance of an elder abuse shelter was. And I knew nothing about aging in the field of the elder justice. I really knew nothing. But what I did know is that I enjoyed advocating for vulnerable populations, and I was very interested in the intersection of the family dynamics and structure and the law. So when I started here, it was incredible. There was only it was me, I was part-time. There was a director who was part-time, who was also an attorney. She didn't practice. And there was a social worker who was part-time. And I'd only done criminal law, so I knew nothing about guardianship, family court. I didn't know anything about housing court. I really didn't know anything about aging issues. But the more I learned, first of all, I loved working with older adults, and the privilege I had of working within this shelter structure that I do is that I, in essence, live with older adults. So they are all around me. My office is in a long-term care facility, in a skilled nursing facility. So my clients and the people I'm advocating for, giving direct services to, are right here. And I loved it. I got to see older adults, my clients, and I started to learn about the incredible range of people who were presented to me over the age of 60. And, there's 60 seems, especially now, 15 years later, 60 doesn't feel old whatsoever. And 80, there were 80-year-olds who were highly, functional, and as we could presume all 80-year-olds are. But then there were also some 80-year-olds who had some physical signs of aging and other kinds of disease or illness that may have inflicted or affected them. And then there's the issues of any kind of cognitive impairment and dementia and Alzheimer's, and we know how that's ravaged the older adult population.
So can you just back up a minute? And for our listeners who may not know what the Weinberg Center is, can you just briefly explain what it is, what it does, how it's set up?
Absolutely. So the Weinberg Center for Elder Justice at the Hebrew Home at Riverdale is a shelter model that is meant to fill the service gap for older adults who may be experiencing harm in the community and not have a safe place to go. What is so unique about this particular model and makes it distinct from a domestic violence shelter is that we're able to provide intensive services all around. So if somebody needs rehab, they're able to get rehab. If somebody comes in and they are not so mobile, we have all kinds of assistive devices and the adaptations to the buildings and to the rooms so that it can accommodate somebody who might not be so mobile. Anybody who's had any kind of dementia or does have dementia and any kind of other illnesses or have been affected by some other kind of disease, we're able to accommodate their medical needs. In addition to that, we have legal services and clinical support, trauma-informed clinical support, trauma-informed legal services. We have a public health analyst. So this whole multidisciplinary team, we have a nurse practitioner also, in addition to the staff that's here. But all of the people who come in here are able to get services that are part of the long-term care facility in addition to the services of the Weinberg Center team. So we're able to provide safety. We have security here. We're able to enforce orders of protection, and we're able to advocate to get orders of protection. We're able to provide credit checks for financial wellness and as a mechanism to sort of address potential scams or identity theft. So we work in a multitude of ways as a multidisciplinary team that is quite unique to services for the aging population.
Yeah, I'd even go so far as to say it's unique for services for many other populations as well, but definitely within aging. And so how do you see your role in particular in the context of the aging field?
I hope to help bring awareness. I hope that the Weinberg Center and our whole team can really raise awareness as to what elder abuse is, what it looks like, what its impact is on an older adult, and provide potential remedies or help to reduce the harm to an older adult in the community, and to bring creative and new ideas to the field so that we, together with my amazing colleagues in the field, can bring one voice that can add to a general movement that would really think about the older adults aging and all of the different needs that exist at this time. And as our society and politics are changing so much, ways to really reduce harm to an older adult, and introduce ways in which an older adult can stay at home and be safe, be where they want to be and stay safe, keep their family members and be safe, all of those kinds of issues, and its intersection with the legal system and the way the legal system can really act as a mechanism for support for older adults, and really for attorneys to help identify issues of abuse that they may see and recognize that they can have a role in it and they can do something about it.
Yeah, it seems like you've had a really good opportunity to work in this area for quite some time, and so you've seen a lot. What has surprised you the most about aging, either personally or professionally?
I think what has surprised me the most is the impact of the parent-child, adult-child, older adult relationship, and the power of that relationship and its impact on harm an older adult might be willing to endure, frankly, because of that relationship. I think of elder abuse as being in three sort of categories. One would be in which the harm has come as a complete stranger, a scammer, somebody who's done maybe identity theft, mail theft, all the different frauds that can occur, that kind of thing. And in those cases, frankly, the impact on the older adult can be significant and weighed differently than a younger population, because we're talking about perhaps use of all one's resources and lack of potential for gaining new resources or more resources. It can mean if your home becomes unsafe or sold out from underneath you, or you voluntarily sell it thinking or participating in some kind of scam unbeknownst to yourself or unbeknownst to the older adult. You know, in those kinds of situations, it tends to be relatively easy to work with an older adult because we all have, it's not really not so discriminatory. It's not necessarily the most ageist kind of crime. But then you also think about the bucket of people who are older adults and they're being taken advantage of because of something that they have to offer, particular to the older adult. So it could be a benefit that they have. Somebody knows they have that benefit and they go in to get that benefit. And in the New York City area, it's their home a lot of times. And so there's a lot of cases that we see where an older adult is isolated or is lonely and befriends the wrong person. And that person then takes advantage of them. And oftentimes a relationship of some sort can ensue, a relationship of dependency, whether it's assistance around the home, assistance outside of the home, whether it's just companionship. Those cases start to become a little bit harder because of the relationship that happens. And so often because that person will move in with the older adult, and once that person's in the home, it can be very complicated. But then the third category of people, going back to your question, is the ones I think that I found the most challenging and I underestimated the most. And that is the category of older adults who I think are harmed by their own children, who are possibly not harming them intentionally, but have a substance misuse issue or a mental health issue or any other kind of everyday type problem. And older, it doesn't matter how old you are. I think as a parent, it becomes very hard to see your child, adult or not, suffer any kind of harm. And I see that now too as a parent myself a lot more, how much our instinct is to protect, and we feel very responsible for them. And granted, I'm still at the stage where I am responsible for my kids, but I can start to see what that looks like when, what that will look like down the road, and having to, the idea of one of my kids doing something to me, what wouldn't I, as a mother, what wouldn't I give to my kids? What wouldn't I do for my kids? There's this feeling, and that plays a tremendous role in the elder abuse cases that we see.
I was wondering what are you working on right now that is exciting to you?
It's very hard for me to narrow this down. I love projects of any sort. I love thinking about, remedies and what we can do. What struck me when thinking about this question is really what we're doing around the issue of going back to my last point of the dynamics in these relationships. I think in bettering our understanding of what that dynamic may look like with an adult child and a parent, really what an older adult wants, the people that come through our doors, what they want, and the people who don't come through our doors, is to, one, stay at home, and two, to make sure that the person who's causing them harm, if it's a child, is taken care of. The older adult doesn't want to see their adult child arrested. They want to see their adult child, most of the time living on their own, healthy, happy, with a job, with a future ahead of them, independent from the older adult. But that so often isn't what's happening. And so we started to look at the idea of restorative justice. And really this started from, first we thought, well, maybe we'll get trained as mediators, and maybe mediation will play a role in helping an older adult work through a fraught relationship with their adult child that may be causing them harm. And then I went to the mediation training and realized that you could not advocate at all. You could not be biased at all. And that just wasn't going to work for me. Because I totally just want to advocate for the older adult in that scenario. And I could advocate for the older adult if what they want is the adult child, but at the same time, if I see, being a mediator just wasn't going to work for me. And for the mission of the Weinberg Center, it just isn't, we really do have a bias, and that's okay. So then we started looking at restorative justice a little bit, and borrowing from those principles, developed a program here called Restorative Steps that we have been slowly developing and launching, and have had great success with it. And I feel very excited by it because it is a complete change for me in many ways. As a former prosecutor, I definitely did not take the position that that we should be speaking with the person causing harm and necessarily trying to help them in any way, or that was not within my purview at all. But because that was so clearly what our clients wanted, and you just can't stand in the way of that relationship. And at the end of the day, if you're client centered, you have to start to pay attention. And So we've developed this program that really works well within the shelter model because we have security, we have extra support, where we can, in essence, ask somebody to, for instance, come in and go over an agreement and sign an agreement. And if the agreement isn't followed, there can be consequences, because we are a secure facility. And our next iteration, we launched one where it really had to come from the voice of the older adult who wanted it. And then we've sort of started thinking about a second group of people, which is older adults who are cognitively impaired. And what would reuniting or reestablishing or reconnecting with the person who caused them harm look like for that person, and how do you understand that that is what the older adult really wants? And we've had, again, great success actually with that one as well. And the next piece that we're looking at is when somebody comes into shelter, and they're moving back into the community, how to lay the foundation and maybe do some practice run reconnection, establishing some sort of safer relationship with their typically it's their adult child. So yeah, right now, that is what I'm most excited about. I'm really excited because we're moving in the right direction. I think with it, we're going forward, and we're going to be able to reduce the harm, and looking at it more through that lens than an absolute lens, I think will allow us to assist more people.
Well, thanks for talking about that, Deirdre, because I think it's really important to hear about, steps that your program's taking with restorative justice. Are there any other pertinent issues you're looking at in the field right now that people should be made aware of?
Oh, I can say that we're thinking a lot about borrowing from the principles of restorative justice, because I think I do believe that the field is going to have to move more and more in that direction in order to get to the large number of people who are being harmed and who are not reporting or not identifying as being abused. And if we want to make an impact, I think that we have to start looking at how to also meet their desire to possibly help the person who's causing them harm. Guardianship, I know, is another big topic right now, hot topic. And I often feel like I may not be with mainstream because I defend guardianship so often. But that's because I come at it with the perspective of I've seen all the good that guardianship and the guardianship process can bring for an older adult, whether it be that a guardian gets in place and is able to stop financial exploitation and save the resources of an older adult from hemorrhaging, or whether it's getting a restraining order against somebody who's moved in with them and is now selling drugs out of their apartment, or getting an older adult medically stabilized through a guardianship process. And while I agree with many of the critics of guardianship overall, I also see a lot of good in it, and really want to come up with tools to address how elder abuse surfaces through the guardianship process. So we are coming out soon with a guide on elder abuse and guardianship cases, because we think it's an area where a lot of older adults are very, very vulnerable, in fact, are cognitively impaired, and therefore can easily be taken advantage of, if not, yeah. And that often is what brings them to the point of needing something, like needing some assistance. So trying to work that into our perspective about guardianship is something that I'd like to think about and try to do.
Great. Well, that sounds exciting as well. Thank you so much for joining us today. Is there anything else you want to make a plug for before we sign off, or?
Yeah, just that I think that shelter models can exist in every community and that there's no reason every community shouldn't have a safe place for older adults to go when they're being harmed in their home and it's not safe for them. And now is an opportune time to be thinking about this and looking at this because COVID has had such detrimental effects on all of us, older adults, our communities, and also healthcare and the way that we're responding to healthcare and what's going to happen as we all age and where we're going to go and where we get that support and assistance and how we can depend on each other and depend on our community to get some of that support. So um, we have the Spring Alliance, which is something we lead that is a culmination and a community of elder abuse shelters. And those models can look very different from ours, but if that's something that interests anybody, I'd really ask that they reach out to us and we're eager to talk to people and eager to try to help other communities develop what we find has been really successful here, and in many other communities in the United States. So I certainly would make a plug for that. And if I may, also just plug for attorneys to pay attention to what their role can be in elder justice. I mean, it is amazing. One of the things I absolutely love about our field is that it touches upon so many different things. I mean, I always say elder law is anything having to do with when your client is an older adult or when anything you're doing affects an older adult. And that's in so many different areas. So it really, speaking to my former law school student self, open your eyes and see that there's actually so much more out there. And it's a fascinating field with a lot of intersection with other types of disciplines and a great opportunity to learn and a great opportunity to be an advocate and make a difference. Not enough people are in the field, and those that are tend to be very impassioned and collegial, and it's a great place to be. So and a great opportunity to learn about many different other areas and what you can do about it. Our latest referral actually to our shelter, successful referral, was from an attorney who just knew that something wasn't right and was aware of a multidisciplinary team, brought it to them and connected it to us, and it was great. And that is an example that I think we all could learn from because it's just an attorney who had a gut feeling and this wasn't what she typically did, but she knew something wasn't quite right and just reached out about it. So
Oh, great. And we'll be sure to have links to Weinberg Center on our podcast notes for this
great.
episode. So, and if anyone is interested, they can always listen to other episodes by visiting the ABA Commission on Law and Aging's YouTube channel. And for our listeners, we'd like to remind them to like and subscribe to be sure to get any updates. And we look forward to having folks join us for our next episode. Deirdre, we are so indebted to you for joining us today. Thank you so much. And in the meantime, keep on advocating for the legal rights of all.
Oh, thank you. Thank you to both of you and all the work you both do and the whole commission. And I'm proud to be a part of it.
Thank you.